Well, hey everyone, my name is Paul. I'm one of the teaching pastors here at Epic. Yes, I am wearing an office-themed Christmas sweater. Yes, it's very warm. Yes, I'm already sweating. And yes, I'm already regretting this decision. So it's only going to get sweatier from here, so let's get right into this. Speaking of perspiration, someone shared a news story with me this week, and the first line of the article read, "A middle school student put on enough Axe body spray to stop a bus." Yes, I am serious. Someone in Parks has said, "Are you serious?" Yes, I was intrigued. Actually, I was hyperventilating. I teach middle school full time, so this is a little bit too real for me. I know all too well the dangers of Axe body spray. So basically the story was this. Kids on the bus were complaining about, and I quote, "a noxious smell." It's kind of like a poisonous smell. The bus driver pulled over, evacuated the bus. They called 911. The fire department showed up, and they found out that it was a kid who had emptied an entire can of Axe body spray on the bus. Now, let me speak for all teachers and maybe just all rational human beings everywhere. Axe body spray is the worst. It's the worst, man. And the article actually posed this question: how much Axe body spray is too much? And my answer is any amount of Axe body spray. So in my experience, again, I have very real firsthand experience with this. It's always boys. They think that it's going to make them smell good. They think that it's making them appealing, but really, let's be honest, it smells like garbage. And they spray it really, and this is the worst part, they'll spray it to cover up their BO, especially like after gym class, something like that. But what happens is now you just have a really cheap, bad-smelling cologne substitute mixed in with the smell of BO, and so it's not good. There's a reason why kids prank each other by spraying Axe body spray on each other. Like that, there's a reason for that. The kids on that bus thought they were being poisoned. That's how bad it is. Like, think about that. So if you're a teenage boy, allow me to give you some very simple advice. If you're trying to impress somebody, you're trying to get a date. Number 1, use actual soap. Number 2, use actual deodorant. And number 3, just do not use Axe body spray. Use literally anything else, okay? You're welcome. Now, what does Axe body spray have to do with what we're talking about today? You'll find out. You'll find out. So we're in this series called The Unsettling Solution for just about everything. And we've talked about how that solution is grace. And so far in this series, we've established a few things about grace. That grace is undeserved, unearned, unearnable favor. Basically, grace is not something you can work for. You can't earn it. This is the nature of grace. It's a gift. And then we talked about this last week, that we want grace more than we want fairness. So we want life to be fair until we don't. We want life to be fair until we don't. We want fairness until we're the ones who make a mistake or we're the ones who do something wrong. And then in those moments, we reveal what we actually want, and that's grace. And I think deep down, we are desperate for grace in our lives. We want grace more than we want fairness. And grace is actually pretty amazing, but it's pretty unsettling too, because it upsets some of the ways that we normally think and operate. So for example, we operate, kind of all of us here, we operate within a meritocracy. And what a meritocracy is everything works by you get what you deserve. You earn what you get. What we do determines our status. But here's what we said last week, that it's actually grace that determines your worth. So if someone believes that their skill determines their worth, or their job determines their worth, or anything else that they do determines their worth, then here's what happens. Everything is great as long as you are performing great. Everything is fine as long as you're performing fine. But as soon as we lose that skill, as soon as we lose that job, as soon as we lose that ability, as soon as our performance dips, we're in trouble. And this is the myth that so many of us believe, that what we do and how well we do it determines whether or not we're worth loving. And so what better time of year than this, as we build toward Christmas, to be reminded that it's not what you do or don't do that makes you worth loving. It's not what you do. It's not what you don't do that makes you worth loving. And there's this mysterious, sometimes baffling, sometimes unsettling, amazing, beautiful thing called grace that says you are loved as you are. You're loved as you are. It's a gift to you, and you can't earn it, and that's good news. And everything that we do, everything that you do, everything that I do, stems from what we believe about how we get our worth. And because of grace allows us to operate from this knowledge that we're loved, and then good things happen. So maybe when you finally start to get grace, you can see why it might be the solution for just about everything. Now, can I be honest with you? This series has been really hard to do. It's been really hard to do. The topic itself, grace, is so important, and really, we could spend every single week, the whole year, talking about it. And the problem is this, the challenge is this, that we could spend every single week of the year talking about it, but we still have a hard time fully explaining it. Even if we talked about grace every single week for the whole year, we'd still have a really hard time fully explaining it. And so here's what I really believe about grace, that grace is better experienced than explained. The grace is better experienced than explained. So, and I really hope that we've explained grace well in this series. I hope that the way we've explained it has been helpful. Some of you might be nodding your heads, and some of you are going, I don't know. We've worked really hard to do our best at trying to do that. But at the end of the day, it matters less how well I explain grace or how much I explain it to you. You have to just experience it to really get it. Really, you have to experience it to really get it. And I think once we've experienced grace, and once we know what it's like, and once we know why it's so amazing, then that's when the good stuff happens. And once that happens, by the way, once you've experienced it, and once you know what it's like, and once you know why it's so amazing, your job isn't done. We actually find this instruction in Hebrews 12:15. It says, see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God. Now, I think there are a few other translations that do a better job of getting really at what this verse is saying. So some other translations say, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. Or see to it that no one fails to receive the grace of God. I actually like the way the Message version puts it. It says, make sure no one gets left out of God's generosity. Make sure no one gets left out. And basically the charge to us is this, that once you've experienced grace, don't keep it to yourself. Once you've experienced grace, once you know what it is, once you know what it's like, don't keep it to yourself. It's not just for you, it's for others too. And so if you've experienced grace, if you've tasted that, if you know what it's like, then you should want others to experience it. And here's the deal. I think if you want others to experience grace, your best bet is to show it. I mean, it's a classic rule in writing, actually. Show, don't tell. So in other words, it's like, hey, it's way better. If you have the opportunity, you can show something, that'll be way more effective than if you just tell us about it. So if you want people in your life to experience grace, you should show them. And it doesn't hurt to talk about it. It doesn't hurt to try to explain it. But more than anything, people will experience grace when you show it through your actions and the way you live your life. So that's what today is about. How do we show grace to others? And so when we talk about showing grace to others, this is what we're really doing. We're talking about showing generosity and kindness and mercy and love to others, whether they've earned it or not. Whether you think they deserve it or not, you're showing that to them, and that is grace. And there are a million ways to show grace, but today I want to focus specifically on how we can show grace when it's hard to do. Again, a lot of ways to show grace, a lot of people you can show grace to. That's great. I don't want to downplay any act of grace that's out there, because it's all important. We all need it. But I think with the little time that we have today, let's try to tackle the difficult stuff, okay? So this is the people in your life, the people you interact with, or the situations you find yourself in where it is difficult to extend kindness. It's difficult to forgive. It's difficult to love. This is the people who have hurt you, the people you don't get along with, the people who annoy you, the people who live or think so differently from you that you're like, I can't even with this person, can't even. Like people who wear Axe body spray. These are the times when you find yourself in an argument and you don't want to back down because you know you're right. Or you know you're wrong. Some of you guys approach an argument the same way no matter whether you're right or wrong. Essentially, we want to talk about this today. What do we do when we don't want to show grace to someone? What do we do when we don't want to show grace to someone? What do we do when grace is hard to give? Do we still have to? The answer, unfortunately, if you're a follower of Jesus, the answer to that question is yes. Yes. You have to. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus, the good news for you, I guess, is that you can just get out your popcorn right now and just watch us squirm, okay? So how do we show grace when we don't want to? How do we, I like the word cultivate. How do we cultivate grace? How do we grow grace in our lives? How do we grow grace inside of us? I think there's a story found in Scripture, in an account written by Luke, where Jesus finds himself in the presence of two very different kinds of people. And how each one of these people viewed themselves and carried themselves has a lot to show us, I think, about the secret to cultivating and growing grace in our lives. So this is Luke chapter 7, and it says this: when one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And so this is common in this day, to be invited to someone's house and you just sort of lie down and recline around the table, which sounds so great. I want to do that. And this is the home of a Pharisee, a religious leader. So in other words, status-wise, this is like the right kind of company that you want to keep. This is someone who's educated, they're well-to-do, they're respected in the community, they have a good reputation. And so he's at this person's house, and then a woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. And so when we see this as a woman who lived a sinful life, there are several potential implications of what that might mean. But for our purposes today, essentially this is what you need to know. She was not the right, quote unquote, right company to keep, particularly considering whose house they were in. Story goes on. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. So, a lot of cultural differences between this and our society. I'm not letting anybody kiss my feet, all right? I'm not letting anybody get near my feet, all right? This is a thing that, I'm not okay with this. So this might be weird for us to think about, but in this culture, washing of the feet and washing of the feet had a symbolic significance in many ways. I mean, these were saying things about serving, about hospitality, even about holiness. So if you're reading that and you think that's weird, I want you to think about how in 2019, 4 friends can make plans to get together, and they finally get together in one room, and then they're there in each other's presence, and now instead of talking to each other, they're all just staring at their phone screens instead of actually interacting with each other. That's weird, okay? So we all got weird stuff, all right? We all have weird stuff, all right? The point is this, that this woman is demonstrating with her actions great reverence for Jesus, great affection, great affinity, washing his feet with her own hair, pours what we can assume is really expensive perfume. This would have been so valuable to her. You don't just waste this on just anybody. And so if you think that this scene is weird because it's culturally different, I promise you, the people who were in this house at the time were disturbed as well, but for other reasons. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man, and he's talking about Jesus here, if this man were a prophet, he would know who's touching him and what kind of a woman she is, that she is a sinner. That's the way I hear it in my head. That she is a sinner. This Pharisee is appalled. He's offended by what he sees because he knows her reputation. And people with that kind of reputation don't get to just walk into your house and touch you. All right, and so then he's also offended by her. He's also offended that Jesus is allowing this to happen. And so Jesus answers him, Simon, and this is the Pharisee's name, Simon, I have something to tell you. And then Simon says, hey, tell me, teacher. And Jesus goes ahead with a story or a parable. He says, 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which one will love him more? And Simon replies, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. And Jesus says, you have judged correctly. So there are 2 people. Each one owes a debt to their lender. One owes a huge amount, one owes a smaller amount. The lender wipes out, forgives both of their debts. Jesus asks, which one do you think is going to have greater affection for, is going to have more love for, is going to feel more strongly about the lender? And the answer is the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. Now, the story continues. Jesus turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. And what's happening here is Jesus is pointing out the difference between these 2 people, the difference between the Pharisee and the difference between this woman. This woman, what's going on is she understands exactly who she is. She knows she's not putting on a front for anybody. She's not wearing a mask. She's not trying to be somebody she's not. She knows that she's not perfect. She's well aware of the things that she's done and the things that she hasn't done. But here's the key thing. Not only does she know that, but she knows that despite the things she's done, despite the things she's not done, she knows that she's been forgiven and that she is loved regardless. What she's really expressing in her actions is gratitude. Because she knew who she was, and she knew that she was loved anyway. Now, Simon, the Pharisee, he doesn't do any of that. He doesn't do any of the things that she does. Why? Because he doesn't think he needs forgiveness. He doesn't think he needs that. He's good. He's good. He thinks he's good. He thinks he's righteous. Now, you might not relate with washing people's feet with your hair, all right? You may not have ever done that. But I know this for me. I know this scenario because there are people in my life who have seen me at my worst. There are people in my life who have seen me at my lowest, okay, at my lowest. And in those moments where they could have condemned me, they could have shamed me, they could have given up on me, they didn't. When I was at my worst, when I was at my lowest, they showed up. They saw me for who I was. They saw me where I was, and they decided to love me anyway. They pick me up. And I would run through a wall for those people. The friends that I have, the family I have who have done that for me, I would run through a wall for them out of gratitude. Because I understood that they saw me. I couldn't hide. I couldn't put on a front. I couldn't wear a mask. They saw me exactly as I was, and they loved me anyway. Not because I earned it, but because of grace. And so these types of moments, you have moments like this too. If you think about it hard enough, you have these moments too where someone has loved you when you least deserved it. Someone has seen you at your lowest, at your worst, where you couldn't put on a front, you couldn't put on a mask, you couldn't pretend, and they loved you anyway. And these are the moments that we have to, as followers of Jesus, be more and more aware of. These moments where we have needed grace. All of us have been there. All of us have needed it. Not all of us are aware of it. Sometimes we forget. The woman in this story was well aware of her need for grace. Simon was not. Jesus caps this all off by saying this, but whoever has been forgiven little loves little. This is such an important, powerful insight. Whoever forgives little loves little. And for us, what this does, this highlights, I think, a great danger for those of us who call ourselves Christians. It highlights a great blockage in the artery of grace. The key to having grace for others, the key to having grace for even the most difficult people in your life, the people you don't want to show grace to, the key to cultivating and growing in grace doesn't start with what anybody else has done. It starts with me. It starts right here. When I lose sight of the fact that I need grace just as much as anybody else, I will find it difficult to show grace to others. When I lose sight of the fact that I need grace just as much as anybody else, it is going to be difficult to show grace to anybody else. The Pharisee Simon, what he was doing, essentially, he was judging this woman. He thought he was better than her. He thought he was better than her. And here's the thing. He had reasons, right? He had reasons. If you had asked him, hey, why are you acting this way? What's the difference between you and her? He would have a list. He'd be able to fire off that list. He'd say, well, let me list the ways. All right, I do this, 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 and I don't 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 do this. Is that enough? He would have a list. But again, this all comes back to, what do you believe about where you get your worth? Because if your worth is based on what you do, if your worth is based on what you do and what you don't do and how you can perform, then judging people is just a natural result. That's what's going to happen. Here's the thing. You know why I judge people? Because I do this, right? I do this. You know why I judge other people? Because it makes me feel better about myself. Isn't that why we all do this? Think about this. It's really like a drug. It's like a drug, and we turn to it, and once it hits our veins, it feels so good, right? It feels great to talk about how somebody else is so terrible. It feels great to talk about how they're messing up. It feels great to say, well, at least I'm not doing that. You know? That's all about me trying to feel better about me. But here's what's really going on when we judge someone. When I judge someone, I'm trying to elevate my worth at the expense of someone else. And note that I said trying. I'm trying to elevate my worth because you don't actually elevate your worth by judging people. Because your worth does not come from where you stand in relation to someone else. Your worth does not come, it's not determined by how much better or worse you're doing than someone else. Judging people really is a terrible way to try to get self-worth. Now, earlier we talked about the many evils of Axe body spray. Here's where it all comes full circle. Just like Axe body spray is a terrible substitute for cologne, judging people is a terrible substitute for self-worth. Now that's so good, I wrote it down and we're gonna put it on the screen here. I'm gonna say it again. Just like Axe body spray is a terrible substitute for cologne, judging people is a terrible substitute for self-worth. Now some of you might be thinking, you did all of that with Axe body spray just to get here? Yes. Yes, and I feel like I've done a public service in the process. And I need to say this, I am 1000% aware of the irony that I'm talking about not judging people and I'm saying all this stuff about Axe body spray. I know God's still working on me. That's all I can say about that. Judging people is a terrible, terrible, terrible way to try to boost your self-worth because you're always doing it at the expense of someone else. What you're always doing when you're judging someone is you're trying to move yourself up and push that person down. And here's the thing, that's not the way of grace. It's not the way of grace. Fortunately, we know that our worth, or hopefully by now we know that our worth isn't determined by what we do, by what we don't do, by how much better or worse we're doing than other people. Our worth is determined by grace. And by grace, you are loved and you are forgiven, whether you earned it or not. And so this is really the Christian faith in a nutshell, that we are aware of our need for grace. That's where it all starts. Like we are aware, each one of us is aware of our need for grace. And then we accept the grace that's been given to us, the grace that we haven't earned. It's just been given to us freely by God. And then a funny thing happens when we can do this, when we can be aware of our great need for grace, and then we can finally accept it and live in it and rest in it. It will change us. It changes us from selfish people to selfless people. It changes us from self-righteous people to gracious people. And so I think so much of our sin, so many of our mistakes, so much of our wandering that we do in our lives is actually our way of trying to find that worth. It's our way of trying to find unconditional love. I mean, this is you, this is me, this is everyone we know. This is the same people you find so difficult to love because they're annoying, because they upset you, because they've hurt you. We're all just trying to find our worth. We're all just trying to find unconditional love. We're just sometimes looking in the wrong places. But when you can finally stop finding your worth in all of these other things, when you can finally recognize your need for grace, when you finally find true and healthy love that comes from the source of love, when you taste it, when you experience that, man, you look back on all of the other ways that you used to try to find love. You look back on all of the terrible substitutes you've settled for, and you're like, no thanks, I'm good on that. You know, it's like if you've ever experienced finally being in a healthy relationship, And you know what happens when you're finally in a healthy relationship? You look back on all of the other dumb relationships you've had, the other things you've settled for, and you're like, what was I thinking? Right? Have you ever experienced that? You're like, oh my gosh, what is this? How could I have possibly settled for anything less? So we have this choice. You can choose the way of judging. You can choose the way of trying to get your worth by comparing how you're doing with how other people are doing, or you can choose the way of grace. Author Philip Yancey wrote this, that all of us in the church need grace-healed eyes to see the potential in others for the same grace that God has so lavishly bestowed on us. This is what I'm hoping and I'm praying for all of us in our church, that we would have grace-healed eyes to see others. So how do you begin to show grace to someone you don't want to show grace to? You have to start here and allow grace to heal you and help you see that we all need it. All of us start here with ourselves and ask, have I experienced this grace? Am I aware of my need for grace? Am I living, am I resting in this grace? And the thing is, if you're not, then here's a really simple, practical next step, is to pray this prayer. It's just this, a few words. God, show me your grace. If you don't know where to start, if you haven't been aware of this, if you haven't experienced this in your life, and just start here. Just pray this. Pray this today and pray this every day. Pray it multiple times a day. And ask God to open your eyes. Ask God to show you, to make you aware of the grace that you have been shown in your life, to see how much you've needed it, how much you've already been helped by it. And once you've experienced it, once you begin to become aware of it, only then will you be able to do the hard work of showing grace to the people it's hard to show grace to. Now, if there's someone in your life who's hard to love, if there's someone in your life who it is hard to show grace to, then here's a simple prayer for you as well. You can pray this: God, give me grace-healed eyes to see this person. Give me grace-healed eyes. Help me to remember that I'm not better than anybody else because of my status, because of my lifestyle, because of what I do, because of what I don't do. Help me to remember that I've needed grace as much as this person needs grace. Give me grace-healed eyes. Help me to see them in a new way. Now, does this mean you let them walk all over you? Does this mean you put yourself in danger? Does this mean you allow this person to do whatever they want? No. But for many of us, what this means is this can help us to begin to take our first steps to forgive. To begin to take our first steps to cultivate the grace in our lives that's necessary to allow us to show this person grace. It means that we can begin to see somebody the way God sees them, the worth that God has ascribed to them. To know that just like the rest of us, the thing that person in your life, the person who's even the hardest to love, the thing that person needs the most is grace. Not your judgment, not your condemnation, not shame, but grace. So the unsettling solution for just about everything, the thing that I've needed more than anything, the thing that you've needed more than anything, the thing that our neighbors and our families and our friends, the people we don't like, the people we don't get along with, the people who have hurt us, what our city needs, what our country needs, what our world needs, more than anything, is the grace that has been shown to us in Jesus. So this Christmas, as we approach this Christmas and beyond, let's be people who experience grace, who know our need for grace, and who show that grace to others. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your grace. We thank you that you loved us, whether we've earned it or not. God, I pray that today as we move forward, that you would help us, God, to see, to know, to experience your grace. Help us to see our need for it. Help us to see the ways in which you're always showing us grace. Help us to accept it. Help us to live in it. Help us to rest in it. And then, God, give us grace-healed eyes to see others the way you see them. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.